And then the exhaustion that comes with all of it. The exhaustion of even talking about it. Never mind living with it day in and day out, having to explain it to people. And also watching the burden and the weight that it can have on the people around us. And how we can feel like, well, we're changing not only their lives, but our lives as well. And it's great to see so many people, so many couples come together to things like this, because I know the bums on the seat mean more than we ever tell them, but having that support is so important. But we have to acknowledge the weight that our conditions have on them as well. So this is often what we want and what we expect. And I have to say, it's unusual for me to talk to a room with so many men in it. Often so many pain conditions are predominantly affect women. Fibromyalgia, for example, it's over 80% of women that live with it. So I'm sorry, gents, there's a lot of women in all the pictures that I have, because that's usually the audience I'm talking to. So put the men in the same place. This is life, isn't it? We're all trying to juggle so many things. We've all so many different responsibilities. Or this was life, and something has changed, like myself, a new injury happens. This is what I want to be doing, but it's actually not what I'm able to do anymore. And the difference is that if I can accept that I can't do this anymore, I'm making it easier on myself. But still having that high standard of multitasking and doing everything for everybody, and not being able to say no, and going out and weeding the whole garden instead of breaking it down into bits or whatever it may be, not listening to myself on the bad days, completely overdoing it, and then no one sees me for weeks. This is what we want, but we have to see how realistic is that. Because often what's happening is this. I don't want things to change. I want to be that person. I want still to be able to do all of that. And that's so hard. And all the while, oh, you're looking great. Oh, sure, did you get away? It's not necessarily recognised. So, I'll talk very briefly around grief, because I don't want to bring the mood down too low. Just in that there's new ways of looking at loss. And I speak to people about this because most people think if you're grieving, it means you've lost either a person or you've lost maybe a pet. Where, as I say, there's all those little losses that even if you're not living with a chronic illness, so children leave home, turning a teenager into an adult, all of those changes can have a loss with them. And back in the late 60s, Kubler-Ross came up with this idea that there was sort of 5 stages to loss. And most people would say, oh, which is, I'm at the angry point, or, I'm still trying to make a deal with whoever to try and get them back. The bargaining sort of side of it. But we actually look at grief a little bit differently now. Because it isn't this sort of roller coaster where you go in one end, you go through all the stages, and then you come out grand at the end of it. If only life was that simple, it'd be great. What actually happens is that there's 2 sort of pieces of work that needs to happen. And this is for everybody. So there's this sort of loss orientation where we're trying to hold on to whatever it is that we're losing or that we've lost. Be it a person, be it how easily we can move around. Maybe it's, there's a new friend, or you've lost a friend. In an organisation like this, I know it's, 63 years since the last polio epidemic, and it was in Cork, actually. I think it was 1953, I think. 56, excuse my maths. So about 63 years then, if I get that right. So we're looking at people that it was something that happened at that particular time, and in this country there aren't as many people to relate to it anymore, and also the same with healthcare practitioners. Because as many of you retired, so do they. And they're not being faced with polio now. And in a lot of developing countries, obviously, it's still an issue. And I know one gentleman said to me, well, his doctor was from India, and he told him all sorts of things about polio he hadn't heard before, because things had moved on. So we're in that sort of bubble of, this is a thing that doesn't happen to everybody. everybody. But the one thing that everybody understands is how painful it is to lose something. So while they might not understand how difficult it is to live with a certain condition or changes that come with it, they'll understand losing something. And that's a really great way of getting through to people. And also what we say to ourselves. Because we deserve the time to process and take our time with changes. Just as it takes a while after you retire. I'm seeing it with my parents as well. My dad was all ready for retirement, and then he actually retired. He goes, oh, this isn't what I was expecting. It's completely different. And I don't think it's what my mum was expecting either, to be honest. Huge change there. And the negotiating that had to happen. And all the shift at home of when mum was the one who looked after the house and us as kids and did all the cooking. And now she has dad elbowing his way into the kitchen to go, no, actually, no, I'd like to do the cooking from now on. What planet is this, you know? Readjustment all the time. And I think mum is going through a bit of loss, actually, of that responsibility of, I was the woman in the house, I was in charge. And obviously I'm talking in a bit in stereotypes as well. There's lots of different families and relationships now. But that loss orientation is holding on. So if mum was still trying to hold on to us all at home, or keep dad out of the house, or whatever way she saw life, what can't happen then is adjusting and moving with the changes. And that gradual letting go of what we're trying to hold on to so tight. And it's only natural to try and stick with what's comfortable and what we're used to. So this is the new sort of idea, well, it's not that new, the early noughties, but the idea that grief isn't a process you go in one end, come out the other, you're grand. We're actually bouncing around between trying to hold on and also letting go a little bit. And you might have a great day where maybe, making changes at home, letting go of the clothes that maybe don't fit over a new calibre or something like that. I'm sure you guys have all different sorts of tricks of how to hide calibre lines, and the ladies out there, if you're going dancing when you change shoes and all that sort of stuff, I'm sure you have plenty of tips for me. But the letting go and holding on, and actually bounce from one to the other. So it actually looks a bit more like this. It's more messy, isn't it? And I think that actually reflects the human side of loss. And as I say with myself, I thought I was doing quite well. I pace, I try, eat well, I manage my weight, I thought I was ticking all the boxes. And then a new injury came along. I was in a car accident before Christmas, and then I'm like, oh, this is new. Why can't I go back to managing well? I don't want to be laid up, out of action. I was just getting back to action. And I think with the post-polio syndrome, I think that's the thinking that can go along with it. Why now? This time in my life, I'm living well. Why now? So we have to look at and give ourselves the time to process that change. So these are the kind of losses. Our privacy, dignity. I doubt there's a shy person out there. It's usually hop up on the bed, take everything off, let's have a look at you. The hopes and dreams. The plans, like my parents, the plans for retirement. That could easily change if the health condition came along. Our body image, how confident we feel in our body. And I did hear from the stories that a lot of people had said because of polio came along while they were a child, they didn't know any different. So it didn't occur to them that they were any different to any of the other children, until maybe they went home and they kind of had to fit back into life again. But if that changes again as an adult, we've different eyes on it. We've lived another life. So it's harder to get our heads around and make those changes. The financial implications. And I know polio survivors do great work in how you can access grants and the finances to help you make those changes. That's a huge burden and a worry. If there's any sort of legal action that's coming out of any of this as well, huge burden of that stress. Also the role in the family. We're all seeing the huge costs for childcare, and there's a lot of pressure on grandparents now to mind the children. Now, we've left my parents off the hook so far. There's no grandkids, and they're complaining. But I feel like if the grandkids do come along, it's going to go the other way, and they're going, "No, we'd like some time to ourselves again, please." This assumption that, well, if you're retired or if you have grandchildren, that you're the ones that should be minding them, even though you've just earned your own lives back. This is your chance to live it up again. So the loss of that and the expectation. Also the independence. So you may have managed quite well with your partner, wife or spouse, as your carer, or that helps around the house, and then things change and maybe a stranger needs to come into the house. So how does that work then in the dynamic at home? And how that was my job, or I can't do that anymore, or I can't meet your needs, and the guilt maybe that can go with that too. And as I say, this is the bit where we're just looking at what can change, but there is the curve upwards, as you all know. And that's about the building the resilience. Just to check you're all listening, can you all hear me okay so far? Yeah? Okay. I believe it's being recorded too, and I'll send you all a test in about a week's time, okay? Resilience. This is where I should be taking notes really on resilience. When I read the stories that Fran gave me, the lovely book Polio and Us, I didn't hear stories of poor me, it was so hard, I didn't see my parents. Well, you didn't see your parents, but the strength and that I got on with it, and actually it helped me, become more independent. That, okay, I didn't have education for so many years, but I got back at it and overachieved as well. But that overachieving we have to remember too, when there's more changes, it's harder to deal with. So, as I can see in front of me, those caring and supportive relationships in the family and around, like in groups like this, are so important. The capacity to make realistic plans. Now, I'm not going to try and turn anyone into a marathon runner, we have to be realistic. But what changes do we want to make? How realistic is it? And how am I going to get there? We only have to look at January and all the resolutions people come up with, where they're, losing 10 pounds and, going to the gym every day, all those promises they make. But you don't really hear the bit of, well, how are they going to do it? And that's where the day-to-day bits come in. A positive view of yourself and confidence in your strength and abilities. When you're faced with the lack of knowledge in the healthcare community, in that it's not something they're seeing every day, unfortunately it falls back on the patient often to stand up for better care, to be listened to, or for further treatment. And that's where there's great strength in numbers and in Polio Survivors Group, because they can help you with that. Skills in communicating and problem solving. And that's why this is great, because you're all facing very similar problems as well and can compare notes. The capacity to manage those strong feelings and impulses. When change comes along, allowing yourself the time for it to sink in. And just as with any big loss, not making any big changes quickly. Because we can all make decisions out of anger or out of loss. But to remember that emotion of resilience is not built on positivity. And I think we can see that in generations now, where everything is silver-lined. Everyone gets a participation medal. For most of us, we need to appreciate the depth of loss and pain and loss, I'll say it twice, to really appreciate the true happiness and the friendships and the living well. How do we do this though? Making those connections, looking for self-discovery. And I love that there's so many opportunities now for people to learn new skills. In community groups, online, in sheds is a great example of that, even just with a bit of banter. Realistic optimism. We all want to say, oh sure, I'm doing well now, nothing's going to change, knock on wood. Yeah? How realistic is it though? I know myself, even at my age, that my body condition will deteriorate as the years go on. Things are going to change as things go on. So what am I putting in place to help manage that? Taking decisive action. Rather than, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds, or I'd love to be a bit fitter, or, well, I did want to start drawing. Rather than those loose plans, more specific. I'm going to join the local art group. We're going to work towards an exhibition. Or I want to make my own Christmas cards this year, or whatever, a specific little project. Because we're all very good at saying we're starting things and wanting to change things, but actually following through is quite difficult. And one thing around change is that social accountability has a big impact. Just like if someone's trying to stop smoking, the more people you tell about it and the more reminders you get, you're actually more likely to stick with quitting. Moving towards those goals, crises are not insurmountable. I don't need to tell you that. We are still here is your motto, so we can skip that one. Accepting change, but nurturing a positive view of yourself. Nobody deserves polio, nobody asked for it. There was a lot of stigma around all kinds of children who got it in terms of poverty or where they were from or access to services. Viruses don't care how much money you have. Post-polio doesn't care how well you've lived. So we need to remember ourselves and live holding on to that as well. And this image I show to lots of groups because I think when there's chronic pain, it can really make us face who we are in the world. And this image we have a lady looking at her past self in the mirror. So she's looking at the nurse she was, and when she looks in the mirror, that's who she still sees. That's who she still wants to be. And yet, she needs to be supported by a nurse. And I know I personally relate to that image too, in terms of what I see in the mirror is often who I was before pain came along. But what I do is make it harder on myself by holding myself to that standard still. Okay, so what can we do? The compassion, as I can see in the room. Pacing yourself, which is what I'm going to go over next. Avoiding the boom to bust. Has anyone heard the boom to bust before? Yeah. So that thing of I'm having a really good day, that pile of ironing that has to get done, that garden full of weeds, that bit of dust and whatever's been driving you mad while you were out of action for a while, or maybe the fatigue was too bad to cope with it. You get a good fatigue day, try and get everything done, and then you can't do anything for the next few days. So that's boom to bust. Why that's a problem is because every time we go from the boom to the bust, we become more sensitive to it. So it'll take longer to recover, and it takes a shorter amount of time before we get to the bust again, especially with pain. And I'm sure you see it with fatigue too. So eventually you get to the point where instead of going to a shopping centre, which is busy, people can trip you up, it's noisy, you can't control the temperature, all of those things that can impact on the fatigue. The plan is, I'm going to go and do shopping for an hour, you get carried away, it's 3 hours later, and you can't do anything else. Next time you might manage one shop rather than the 3 shops. And then eventually what happens is the thought of going to the shops is enough. And we start talking ourselves out of things, gosh, I wouldn't be able for that. Because going from boom to bust wears us out. And that's everybody. That isn't even if you had a chronic condition or not. So making small incremental changes, micro changes as I call them, because it amounts to great progress. Just as you all saw with the physio's children and the heat therapies and the manipulations, that all those changes built up to moving through the paralysis and all those changes. Connecting with nature or others takes us out of ourselves. So do we have any gardeners in the room? Because I use weeds as an example quite a lot. Any gardeners? Yeah, a few gardeners, okay. Anybody have pets? Yeah? Will we do the cat versus dog people? No? Okay, we won't go there. That's a battle for another day. But one thing with nature and pets is that it gets us out of ourselves. It's the distraction, it's something else to look at, and often it's free, which is always good. There's plenty of other people that will take your money for advice and for this treatment and that treatment. But connecting to something that's bigger than us and having a companion. I know for myself, my cat is the one there at the 4 in the morning. I swear she knows when I'm having a bad day. But also when, at a point in my life, when she went missing, I realised just how little out of life I was getting. And I suddenly had to shift and go, hang on a second. As much as I love the cat and she's important and all the rest, I need to get more from life than what I'm doing at the minute. So we're back to the self-management. All those little things that we can do. Pacing. Usually there's a groan when I say pacing, because there's a robot up there for a reason. Any ideas? Are we robots? No. If it was as easy to plug us in, give us a new upgrade or new software or something and send us off again, we'd do it. It doesn't exist though. Making change is difficult, and just as I said, like myself with the weeding, I need reminders. Be it a person, be it my phone, in the car, I need the reminders to pace myself. Because you get carried away. And you want to keep going, but you don't want the blame that goes along with the downtime afterwards. So, how do we do this? Okay. First thing is knowing how much you can do with whatever kind of activity, knowing how much of it you can do before either the fatigue starts to creep